January 28, 1966. 4 p.m. Troutman Street, Brooklyn. The afternoon is cold and overcast, typical for a New York winter. Salvatore Bill Bonanno adjusts his overcoat as he approaches 1847 Troutman Street, a modest two-story house that belongs to his granduncle. At 33 years old, Bill carries himself with the confidence of a man born to power, but there's tension in his shoulders that wasn't there 5 years ago. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. He's come here for what's supposed to be a peace meeting with Gaspar Di Gregorio, the commission-appointed rival who's been trying to destroy Bill's leadership of the Bonanno crime family for the past year and a half. The neighborhood is quiet. Working-class Italian families, the kind of people who close their curtains when black Cadillacs park on their street and ask no questions about the men in expensive suits who occasionally disappear. Bill checks his watch. 4 o'clock exactly. He's always punctual, a habit ingrained by his father, who taught him that respect begins with keeping your word, even about small things like arrival times. He walks toward the front door, flanked by 2 associates who scan the street with the hypervigilance of men who've survived multiple assassination attempts. The first burst of machine gun fire erupts from a second-story window at 4:02 p.m. Muzzle flashes strobe behind lace curtains as automatic weapons shred the afternoon quiet. Bill dives behind a parked Oldsmobile as bullets spider the windshield inches from his head. His bodyguards return fire with handguns, their shots methodical and aimed, trying to provide cover while their boss crawls toward better protection. For 30 seconds, this quiet residential street becomes a war zone. Neighbors scream. Windows shatter. Spent brass casings rain onto the sidewalk, bouncing and rolling into storm drains where children will find them weeks later and wonder what happened here. When the shooting stops, Bill Bonanno lies pressed against the cold concrete, breathing hard, his expensive overcoat torn by glass and debris. As police sirens wail in the distance, he understands something that will haunt him for the rest of his life. The empire his father built, the criminal organization that once commanded respect from coast to coast, is dying, and he's powerless to save it. This is the story of what happens when you inherit an empire built on violence, but lack the stomach for war. The story of how the most privileged mob son of his generation presided over the destruction of everything his family had spent decades creating. Salvatore Vincent Bill Bonanno was born on November 5, 1932, at Holy Family Hospital in Brooklyn, New York. He emerged into a world where his last name meant more than most people's entire inheritance. His father, Joseph "Joe Bananas" Bonanno, had become boss of what would soon be known as the Bonanno crime family just 1 year earlier, following the assassination of Salvatore Maranzano in September 1931. Joe Bonanno was 27 when he took control of Maranzano's organization, making him one of the youngest crime bosses in American history. But age didn't diminish his authority. He commanded approximately 100 made members and 500 associates who controlled territory from Brooklyn to the Bronx, with operations extending into New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and eventually across the country. The house where Bill spent his early childhood was located on Jefferson Street in Bushwick, a neighborhood where Italian immigrants had recreated the tight-knit communities they'd left behind in Sicily. Here, everyone knew everyone, and everyone understood the unwritten rules that governed their lives. You didn't cooperate with police. You didn't ask questions about your neighbor's business. And you showed proper respect to men like Joe Bonanno. Bill's earliest memories were of Sunday dinners where 30 people gathered around his grandmother's table, speaking in rapid Sicilian while children played between the adults' legs. The men would retire to the back room after eating, smoking cigars, and conducting conversations in hushed tones. Even as a small child, Bill understood that these weren't social gatherings. They were business meetings disguised as family functions. In 1938, when Bill was 6, Joe Bonanno purchased a substantial property in Hempstead, Long Island. The move represented the family's growing prosperity and Joe's desire to distance his children from the day-to-day violence of neighborhood operations. The new house had a circular driveway, manicured lawns, and enough bedrooms to accommodate the large extended family that frequently visited. Bill attended local public schools in Hempstead, where his teachers knew him as the polite, intelligent son of a successful businessman. His father owned several legitimate enterprises, a funeral home, a cheese distribution company, and interests in various garment manufacturers. These businesses provided both legal income and convenient explanations for the family's obvious wealth. But when Bill developed a severe mastoid ear infection at age 10, his parents made a decision that would shape the rest of his life. They enrolled him in a Catholic boarding school in Tucson, Arizona, where the dry desert climate would aid his recovery. The decision was practical. The infection was serious enough to require specialized treatment, but it also served another purpose. It removed Bill from New York during a period when his father was consolidating power through methods that children shouldn't witness. The years in Arizona were formative for Bill Bonanno in ways his parents probably didn't anticipate. Away from the insular world of Brooklyn organized crime, he experienced something most mob children never do: normalcy. He attended classes with ranch hands' sons and mining executives' daughters. He played sports, joined clubs, and discovered that he possessed genuine intelligence and natural leadership abilities. But he also learned to live with contradiction. Letters from home described family celebrations and business successes. Visits from his father brought expensive gifts and affectionate attention. Yet Bill couldn't help noticing that other students' fathers didn't travel with bodyguards, didn't receive mysterious phone calls at all hours, and didn't speak in the careful code words that characterized his family's conversations. When he returned to New York in the late 1940s, Bill was 17 years old, 6 feet tall, handsome in a dark Mediterranean way, and educated far beyond most of his contemporaries in organized crime. He spoke perfect English without the Brooklyn accent that marked many second-generation Italian Americans. He was comfortable in legitimate business settings and capable of sophisticated financial analysis. Joe Bonanno recognized his son's potential immediately, but he also understood that Bill's education had created a problem. The young man was too refined for the brutal realities of crime family leadership, too analytical for decisions that often required immediate, violent responses. The solution was gradual immersion. Bill began attending family meetings as an observer, learning to recognize the various captains, soldiers, and associates who comprised the organization's hierarchy. He studied the family's legitimate businesses, mastering the complex financial structures that concealed illegal revenue and provided employment for members who needed to demonstrate legal income. By 1950, Bill was handling minor administrative functions, scheduling meetings, relaying messages, managing routine financial transactions. His father deliberately kept him away from enforcement activities, believing that direct involvement in violence would compromise his son's ability to interface with legitimate businessmen and corrupt officials. This approach reflected Joe Bonanno's vision for the future of organized crime. He believed that the crude methods of earlier generations, open warfare, spectacular assassinations, crude extortion, were becoming counterproductive. The FBI was growing more sophisticated. Federal prosecutors were developing new legal tools. The future belonged to crime families that could operate through legitimate businesses and political corruption rather than simple intimidation. Bill was perfectly suited for this evolution. He understood complex business operations, maintained relationships with legitimate businessmen, and could represent family interests in settings where traditional mobsters would be immediately recognizable as criminals. He was Joe Bonanno's investment in a future where crime families would control vast enterprises through subtlety rather than violence. On August 18, 1956, Bill married Rosalie Prophesy in a ceremony that represented far more than the union of two young people in love. Rosalie was the niece of Joe Prophesy, boss of one of New York's other major crime families, and one of Joe Bonanno's closest allies on the commission. The wedding was a merger disguised as a marriage, cementing an alliance between two of the most powerful criminal organizations in the country. The ceremony took place at Sacred Hearts Church in Brooklyn, with a reception for approximately 3,000 guests at various venues across the borough. The guest list read like a directory of American organized crime. Every boss and underboss from the 5 families, representatives from crime families in Philadelphia, Buffalo, Detroit, and Chicago, plus dozens of judges, politicians, union leaders, and businessmen whose cooperation the families had purchased over the years. The FBI photographed everyone who attended, building files that would support federal prosecutions for the next 2 decades. But the families didn't care about government surveillance. This was their world, and they believed they owned it completely. Bill and Rosalie moved into a house in East Meadow, Long Island, a comfortable suburban community where their neighbors included legitimate businessmen, professionals, and other crime family members who'd achieved sufficient success to afford upper-middle-class respectability. The house was large but not ostentatious, with a two-car garage, a modest swimming pool, and enough space for the 4 children they would eventually have: Charles, adopted in 1958, Joseph, Salvatore, and Philippa. Shortly after his wedding, Bill was formally inducted as a made member of the Bonanno family in a secret ceremony that bound him to the organization for life. The oath, administered in Italian by his father, committed him to absolute loyalty, complete secrecy, and obedience to family hierarchy. Violation of these vows was punishable by death. Joe Bonanno immediately appointed his son as consigliere, the third highest position in the family and traditionally an advisory role for the organization's wisest and most trusted members. At 24, Bill became one of the youngest consiglieres in the history of American organized crime. Many family members resented this rapid promotion. They believed Bill lacked the experience and street credibility necessary for high-level leadership. Some whispered that he was too educated, too refined, too removed from the harsh realities that governed their world. These tensions would eventually contribute to the Civil War that destroyed the family's power. By the late 1950s, the Bonanno family controlled one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises in American history. Their operations generated an estimated $50 million annually, approximately $500 million in current dollars, through a combination of legitimate businesses and illegal activities that stretched from New York to Arizona to Montreal. The legitimate enterprises provided both income and cover. Joe Bonanno owned Saputo Cheese Company, which imported products from Italy and distributed them throughout North America. The business was genuinely profitable and allowed family members to claim legal employment while conducting illegal activities. The company's import operations also provided opportunities to smuggle contraband, including heroin from Sicily that would fuel the family's expansion into narcotics trafficking. Bonanno Funeral Homes operated several locations in Brooklyn and the Bronx, serving the Italian-American community while allegedly providing convenient disposal methods for murder victims. Federal investigators later suspected that the funeral homes used modified coffins to bury multiple bodies in single graves, though this was never proven in court. The family maintained interests in numerous garment manufacturers in Manhattan's garment district, where they controlled unions and extracted tribute from independent operators. These businesses generated substantial legal income while providing opportunities for labor racketeering and extortion. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. But the illegal operations produced far greater profits. Numbers running, an illegal lottery system, operated throughout Brooklyn, the Bronx, and parts of Manhattan, collecting millions in small bets from working-class residents who dreamed of hitting the winning combination. The operation required hundreds of runners who collected bets, controllers who managed daily operations, and bankers who handled the money flows. Loan sharking operations provided credit to borrowers who couldn't qualify for legitimate loans, typically at interest rates exceeding 100% annually. Customers who defaulted faced escalating pressure, from verbal threats to property damage to physical violence. Many borrowers became permanently indebted to the family, providing free labor or access to their legitimate businesses. Labor racketeering generated enormous profits through control of key unions in construction, trucking, and food service. The family could guarantee labor peace for cooperative employers and orchestrate strikes against uncooperative ones. This power translated into millions in tribute payments and favorable contracts for family-controlled businesses. The family also maintained significant interests in the Fulton fish market, where they controlled several wholesalers and extracted tribute from independent vendors. They had operations at Kennedy Airport, where they orchestrated cargo thefts and controlled some service companies. In Arizona, they owned ranches and other legitimate businesses while maintaining close ties to traditional crime families throughout the Southwest. Perhaps most significantly, the Bonannos maintained closer ties to the Sicilian Mafia than any other American crime family. These connections facilitated heroin importation that would eventually generate hundreds of millions in profits, while also creating the legal vulnerabilities that led to their downfall. In 1963, Joe Bonanno made the decision that destroyed everything his family had spent 30 years building. At the height of his power, commanding respect from coast to coast, and serving on the commission that governed all organized crime in America, he decided to eliminate his rivals and emerge as the undisputed ruler of the American Mafia. The plan was audaciously simple. Working with Joe Magliocco, boss of the Prophesy family, now connected to the Bonannos through Bill's marriage to Rosalie, Joe Bonanno would assassinate 3 rival commission members: Carlo Gambino of the Gambino family, Tommy Lucchese of the Lucchese family, and Stefano Megadino of the Buffalo family, who was also Joe Bonanno's cousin. The assassination plan reflected Joe Bonanno's belief that American organized crime was becoming too fragmented and too visible. The other families were attracting federal attention through spectacular violence and crude criminal activities. They were abandoning traditional Sicilian values in favor of immediate profits. They were allowing non-Italians to gain influence in operations that should remain under strict mafia control. Joe Bonanno envisioned himself as the strongman who would restore order and tradition. With the 3 rival bosses eliminated, he could restructure the commission under his leadership, impose stricter discipline on all crime families, and create the unified criminal empire that had never existed in America. Magliocco assigned the actual killings to Joseph Colombo, a rising captain in his organization known for his intelligence and reliability. But Colombo recognized that the plan was suicidal. Even if the assassination succeeded, the surviving families would unite against Bonanno and Magliocco. Every law enforcement agency in America would focus on finding the killers. The entire structure of organized crime would collapse into warfare that nobody could win. Instead of carrying out the murders, Colombo revealed the plot to its intended targets. He provided detailed information about the plan, the participants, and the timeline for execution. In exchange, he received protection from the other families and would eventually be promoted to head his own crime family. The betrayal was devastating. The commission immediately recognized that Magliocco lacked the vision and authority to conceive such an ambitious plan. They correctly identified Joe Bonanno as the mastermind and issued a summons for him to appear before them to answer for this unprecedented treachery. Joe Bonanno had 2 choices: face commission judgment, which would almost certainly result in his execution, or disappear and hope that time would provide opportunities for negotiation. On October 21, 1964, he chose to vanish. At approximately 11 p.m. on October 21, 1964, Joe Bonanno was walking on Park Avenue near his lawyer's office when 2 men approached him. According to his later account, they forced him into a car at gunpoint and drove him to an unknown location where he was held captive for 19 months. The kidnapping story was pure fiction. Federal investigators, rival crime families, and eventually Joe Bonanno himself acknowledged that he had simply gone into hiding to avoid commission retaliation. He spent the next year and a half moving between safe houses, communicating with his family through intermediaries, and hoping to find a resolution that would allow his return to power. But his disappearance created a leadership vacuum that the commission was determined to fill. They appointed Gaspar Di Gregorio, a longtime Bonanno captain, as the family's new boss. Di Gregorio was 64 years old, a traditionalist who had been passed over for leadership when Joe Bonanno originally rose to power. He accepted commission backing because it gave him the opportunity to settle 30 years of accumulated grievances. This created an impossible situation for Bill Bonanno. As his father's heir and the highest-ranking family member still active in New York, he was the natural leader of the Loyalist faction. But as a made member of the organization, he was technically obligated to obey the commission-appointed boss. The contradiction was irreconcilable, and it guaranteed civil war. Bill chose loyalty to his father over obedience to the commission. This decision was probably inevitable. Family blood trumped organizational hierarchy in traditional Sicilian culture, but it also ensured that the conflict would be personal rather than simply political. Di Gregorio wasn't just claiming leadership of the family. He was seeking revenge against the Bonannos who had overshadowed him for 3 decades. The first killing occurred on October 21, 1964, exactly 1 month after Joe Bonanno's disappearance. Carlo Samari, a soldier loyal to the Bonanno faction, was shot dead outside his home in Brooklyn. The murder was professional and brutal, designed to send a message that the Di Gregorio faction would not tolerate resistance from loyalists. The Bill Bonanno faction responded on February 10, 1965, when Di Gregorio's soldier Joe Badalamont was killed in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. His body was found in an alley behind a social club, shot multiple times at close range. The war had begun in earnest. What followed was 18 months of escalating violence that transformed one of the most powerful crime families in America into a national joke. The media dubbed it the Bonanno War, a nickname that humiliated both factions and undermined whatever authority they might have retained. The conflict played out through drive-by shootings, bombings, and assassination attempts that often missed their targets but terrorized innocent bystanders. On March 15, 1965, Bill Bonanno and several associates were fired upon while driving to a meeting in Manhattan. Their car was riddled with bullets, but no one was seriously wounded. Properties associated with both factions were bombed or vandalized. Social clubs were shot up. Family members went into hiding or left the city entirely. The constant violence attracted exactly the kind of law enforcement attention that successful crime families spent enormous amounts of money avoiding. Throughout this period, Bill Bonanno attempted to end the war through negotiation. He arranged peace meetings, offered territorial concessions, and sought mediation from other family bosses. Every gesture was interpreted as weakness by men who only respected strength. Every attempt at diplomacy convinced more family members that Bill lacked the ruthlessness necessary for effective leadership. The fundamental problem was that Bill Bonanno was trying to win a war while avoiding the brutal methods that wars require. He could authorize defensive violence, but he wouldn't sanction the kind of systematic terrorism that might have broken the Di Gregorio faction's will to continue fighting. His education and sophistication, the qualities his father had cultivated to prepare him for modern criminal leadership, became liabilities in a conflict that required medieval brutality. By January 1966, both factions were exhausted. The war had consumed resources, attracted unwanted attention, and destroyed the family's reputation within the broader organized crime community. Di Gregorio, now 65 and suffering from heart problems exacerbated by stress, contacted Bill Bonanno through intermediaries to propose a final peace meeting. The location chosen was 1847 Troutman Street in Brooklyn, the home of Bill's granduncle. The house was considered neutral ground, family property that belonged to neither faction. Di Gregorio suggested that both sides could bring limited security, but that the meeting itself would be conducted peacefully. Bill Bonanno agreed to the meeting despite advice from associates who suspected a trap. At 33, he was tired of the violence and desperate for any opportunity to end the conflict. He genuinely believed that reasonable men could find reasonable solutions to their disputes, even in the world of organized crime. The January 28th ambush proved him wrong. Di Gregorio's men had positioned themselves in the second floor of the house, armed with automatic weapons and prepared to eliminate the rival faction's leadership in a single coordinated attack. Only Bill's instinctive reaction to the first shots saved him from certain death. The failed assassination attempt demonstrated that negotiation was impossible. The war would continue until one side was completely destroyed or until external forces imposed a solution. Bill Bonanno finally understood that his enemy wasn't interested in territorial division or power sharing. Di Gregorio wanted the complete elimination of the Bonanno bloodline from organized crime. Throughout the Bonanno War, FBI surveillance teams monitored both factions with unprecedented intensity. The Bureau's New York office assigned multiple agents to the case, deployed extensive electronic surveillance, and developed sources within both camps who provided detailed intelligence about planned operations and internal disputes. Agent Richard Anderson led the federal investigation, cultivating relationships with various family members while building cases for future prosecutions. Anderson was particularly skilled at exploiting the tensions within criminal organizations, offering selective enforcement and potential leniency in exchange for cooperation. FBI reports from this period contain remarkably specific information about family meetings, financial operations, and strategic planning. The source of this intelligence remained classified for decades, but the level of detail suggests the Bureau had developed sources at the highest levels of the organization. In his 1999 memoir, Bound by Honor, Bill Bonanno refers to Agent Anderson as Dick, suggesting a personal relationship that went beyond typical law enforcement interrogation. Some researchers have speculated that Bill provided information to federal authorities, though this has never been proven conclusively. Whether or not Bill was an active informant, the federal investigation was creating enormous pressure on both factions. Wiretaps captured incriminating conversations. Surveillance teams documented illegal meetings. Financial investigations traced money flows through legitimate businesses. The war was not only destroying the family from within, it was providing federal prosecutors with evidence they could use to destroy whatever survived. By 1968, the Bonanno War had achieved nothing except mutual destruction. DiGregorio suffered a severe heart attack and retired from active leadership. The commission, frustrated with the ongoing violence and negative publicity, appointed Paul Sciacca as a compromise boss and ordered him to end the conflict permanently. Sciacca lacked the personal animosity that had driven DiGregorio's vendetta against the Bonannos. He was also realistic enough to understand that the family was too weak to sustain continued internal warfare. He negotiated a settlement that allowed both factions to save face while ending active hostilities. Joe Bonanno emerged from hiding in May 1966, looking older and diminished. Federal agents arrested him immediately, but the charges were relatively minor and he was released on bail. Over the next 2 years, he gradually withdrew from active involvement in family operations while negotiating his permanent retirement. In 1969, Joe Bonanno officially retired from organized crime and moved permanently to Tucson, Arizona. At age 64, the man who had once dreamed of ruling all-American organized crime became a legitimate businessman, operating a small dairy farm and writing his memoirs. Bill followed his father into exile. The empire he had been groomed to inherit was a shadow of its former power, weakened by internal warfare, federal prosecutions, and the loss of territory to rival families. Rather than attempting to rebuild what couldn't be salvaged, he chose to begin a new life outside organized crime. Bill Bonanno spent the remainder of his life in Arizona, working in legitimate businesses while writing books and producing television films about the world he had lost. His 1999 memoir, Bound by Honor, was part autobiography, part organized crime history, and part justification for decisions that had led his family to ruin. The book revealed the fundamental contradictions that had defined his life. He genuinely believed in the traditional values his father had taught him: honor, loyalty, respect for family. But he also understood that those values had been sustained through violence and corruption. He wanted to preserve his family's legacy while acknowledging the harm they had caused to countless victims. "I was born into a world of respect, tradition, and honor," he wrote. "But I was never allowed to choose whether that world was worth preserving." Bill Bonanno died on January 1, 2008, at age 75. He had outlived most participants in the Bonanno War and witnessed the decline of traditional organized crime in America. The family his father built was controlled by men whose names were largely unknown to law enforcement or the public, generating a fraction of its former revenue through diminished rackets that federal authorities monitored constantly. His life illustrates the impossibility of inheriting criminal power across generations. Crime families require constant violence to maintain discipline and territory. They must adapt continuously to law enforcement pressure, technological change, and shifting economic opportunities. These demands create leadership requirements that can't be taught in schools or inherited through bloodlines. Bill Bonanno possessed the education, sophistication, and analytical intelligence that his father believed necessary for modern criminal leadership. But he lacked the fundamental ruthlessness that criminal organizations require for survival. He could authorize defensive violence, but he couldn't initiate the systematic brutality that might have won the Bonanno War decisively. The tragedy of Bill Bonanno wasn't that he failed to become a successful crime boss. It was that he spent his entire adult life trying to preserve an empire built on values he couldn't fully embrace. He inherited power he was too civilized to use effectively and responsibilities he was too intelligent to ignore completely. In the end, the most powerful crime family son of his generation presided over his family's destruction not because he was weak, but because he wasn't strong enough for the world he'd inherited. The empire that took 30 years to build was destroyed in 5 years of warfare that solved nothing, changed nothing and left everyone involved worse off than they'd been before. Today, the house on Troutman Street looks much as it did in 1966. The bullet holes have been repaired, the windows replaced, the memories buried under layers of new ownership and respectable neighbors who know nothing about what happened there. There's no historical marker, no acknowledgement that this quiet residential block witnessed one of the most significant moments in the decline of American organized crime. But for anyone who understands the history, the address represents something larger than a failed assassination attempt. It marks the moment when the last generation of traditional crime family leadership acknowledged that they could no longer control their world through violence alone. The Bonanno War didn't just destroy the Bonanno family. It demonstrated that the entire structure of American organized crime was becoming obsolete. Bill Bonanno spent the rest of his life trying to explain that world to people who had never lived in it and defending decisions that had destroyed everything his family had built. His story remains the definitive account of what happens when inherited power meets generational change in a criminal organization that can't adapt fast enough to survive.